Hello everyone, my name is John and I am so excited to have you here with me in my home today. Uh, as so many of you know, at the time of this recording, we've got a pretty big ice storm kind of rolling through a lot of the United States. I'm a registered nurse, so I'll have to get out in it at some point. But today, on Saturday, I don't have any obligations like that, so we're kind of iced in for now. We've also just moved into our new home. We don't have all of our things yet, mostly just essentials. And I've got a few books that I had with me where we were living before behind me. They're mostly, not completely, but mostly new books that I purchased within the last 6 months to a year. Mostly after having gone on hiatus on this channel here. I've taken a major interest in some American history, mostly surrounding Revolutionary War, Civil War. Just an interest in that. I don't think that'll change the direction of the channel too much, but just something I had on my mind and wanted to talk about. I'm gonna show you my shelf behind me. There's one book in particular that we are going to look at in more depth, and it's one that that I don't think many people talk a whole lot about. I've not seen a lot of discussion on it. Of course, you'll see some Ron Chernow and some absolute classics of the biography and history genre, but this one is one that I had never heard of before, so I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that one. But let's go back here, and I want to show you some of the new books I've picked up on history. All right, so here's my shelves here. There are two. This doesn't make up, like I said, everything that I own so far as history, but it is most of it. A lot of these are books that I have picked up recently, but a couple of these you may have seen in my previous library tour. The first of these is Rubicon by Tom Holland. These are vaguely in order of which they happened. So back in ancient Rome, Rubicon is the story of Julius Caesar and the fall of the Roman Republic. Of course, he goes all the way back to Caius Marius and others who kind of build up to the fall of the Roman Republic. I read it in preparation for doing a deep dive into Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and it really astounded me just how close to actual history Shakespeare was, and just how exciting and turbulent that time was. Tom Holland is a brilliant writer. He has a podcast these days called The Rest is History that I listen to on occasion. So a highly recommended book on ancient Rome. He's got a couple of other books in this series. I think it's Dominion and then Pax that kind of continue the story on to like Augustus through Nero and then on to the Golden Age of Rome. So fascinating stuff there. The next book is David Grann's The Wager. That book I read that book not long after it came out. It's only been out for a couple of years. And I don't read a whole lot of books that are new, but I did read this. And what an exciting book. I mean, it opens just like a movie. It is about basically a forgotten war between England and Spain called the War of Jenkins' Ear, if I'm remembering correctly. And entails a ship called the Wager, as it is chasing down a Spanish galleon, and it crashes onto a deserted island off the coast of the lower tip of South America. And they have to find some semblance of naval order. And in doing so, the captain thinks that they can still save the voyage and complete their mission, and another faction emerges that say that they need to do whatever they need to survive. And so mutiny breaks out, and there's war and bloodshed and cannibalism and just all the terrible, but exciting to read about stuff that you can expect. And it ends with a kind of a trial, a he said, she said, whodunit as to unpacking what happened when these survivors come home, about what happened on the island when they reach England once again. So I highly recommend this book. It reads just like a novel. Got Mayflower on the shelf. I think these two books should probably be swapped around, but I have yet to read this book. It's by Nathaniel Philbrick. I've heard great things, wonderful things, and I do plan to read it very soon. A book on the golden age of piracy by Mr. Rankin. Don't have much to say on that one. I don't think it's a classic per se, but definitely an informative little book on pirates. The Glorious Cause, which is a part of the Oxford American History series. It looks like a really good single-volume take on the Revolutionary War. I've not read this one. I have read 1776 by David McCullough. Not a whole lot to say on David McCullough. He's just a classic writer of American history. This book does take the year 1776, so it doesn't talk about what happened before, and it doesn't really talk about what happens after, other than for what you need to know to understand the story in which the year in which the story he's telling takes place. Another fact about this book that surprised me a little bit is that this book centers around George Washington, Nathaniel Greene, and Henry Knox, and the Continental Army that's fighting in the U.S. Revolutionary War. It does not talk a lot about the Continental Congress, Thomas Jefferson, and the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So that was just an interesting fact. I think I expected a little bit more on that side of things, and it does not really discuss that in great detail. After that, Washington, A Life by Ron Chernow. I read that book recently. It is probably the gold standard by which all great biographies should try to live up to. An excellent cradle-to-grave discussion of a I wouldn't say a complicated man, but a stoic and difficult to read man, George Washington. Gave me a lot of appreciation for who he was, but really it takes a candid look at his life. It doesn't leave anything out. John Adams by David McCullough, another classic of American history. I have yet to read this one all the way through, but I have heard wonderful things about it. John Meckham, Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power, a book on Thomas Jefferson that I still have yet to read. I have another book by John Meckham about Andrew Jackson down here that we'll talk about, and that's been very good. That's actually my current read. So I have high hopes that The Art of Power will have the same power. And then beside that is Stephen E. Ambrose's Undaunted Courage, which is about Lewis and Clark. I do know about Stephen Ambrose's controversies that he had later in life, some accusations of plagiarism, some accusations of some poor historical research. So, sometimes you take things that he writes with a grain of salt. I do believe that a lot of those, if I'm remembering correctly, a lot of those discussions are for his much later books. I don't think Undaunted Courage is one that is specifically maligned. I think one that I have down here is discussed in more detail like that. But I do have it on the shelf, and it is a solid and very readable biography of specifically Meriwether Lewis. Ron Chernow's Alexander Hamilton, a brilliant biography, and of course the inspiration for the musical. I have yet to read this one all the way through, but I know it's also going to be good if it's written by the same guy who wrote Washington. Down here I have shelf number 2, Citizens by Simon Schama, is by far probably the most artistically brilliant book I have on these shelves. It is a history of the French Revolution. It's written in the late 80s, I believe, and it is just the prose. It is a beautiful book. I have another book on the French Revolution that's not pictured here. It's the Oxford History of the French Revolution, and in comparison with that, this book is just a joy to read. The Oxford History of the French Revolution had to be one of the driest books I've ever read, and one of the few books that I did not finish. I could find very little to redeem about it. Of course, I expect my history books to be factual, but the Oxford history, it, it, it it takes a turbulent and exciting period and made it so dry that I couldn't handle it. It spent over 100 pages discussing complex geography about France, which admittedly may be very important, but it spent less than a paragraph on the storming of the Bastille. So when I got to that part and it was over in less than a paragraph, I couldn't finish it. But Citizens does not have that problem. It is a beautiful book. It is a wonderful book, and I highly recommend it. American Lion by John Meckham. Like I said, this is the book I'm on currently. It takes a candid look at the life, specifically the presidency. It talks some, but not in enormous detail about his earlier life in the Battle of New Orleans and things of that nature. But it takes a candid look at the life of Old Hickory, Andrew Jackson. He was capable of good things, but he was capable of some very, very bad things. The Indian removal policy and other things are talked about in great detail. The Trail of Tears, and all of those things. I think that you can see a lot of parallels to what we see today in Andrew Jackson's life. Not only that, it kind of actually fascinates me a little bit, and it's not to say that Andrew Jackson was a very influential president in American history. No one can say otherwise on that. But it cracks me up that he is on the $20 bill, provided that he killed the banks at the time. He stood against everything that the Treasury Department was built on, and everything that Alexander Hamilton and the generations before him built up. But it also, it doesn't go into great detail, but I think it does also show how his early life influenced the decisions that he made. Andrew Jackson did have a very difficult life growing up, and so I think you can see a lot of the decisions that he made later in life, not improved by in any sense, but colored by the perceptions that he had of life that he had when he was a young man. Next up, we've got a lot of Civil War stuff. The Battle Cry of Freedom, actually 2 books here. One's the illustrated version, the other is just the standard hardcover, by James M. McPherson, considered to be probably the best 1-volume take on the Civil War. It is an excellent book. I read that one very recently. It's dense. It's considered historically sound, and I enjoyed it immensely. We do have Lincoln, some speeches and writings from his presidency. There's another volume that goes before this that I don't own. That's his Douglas debates and his earlier writings. But I have, this is the volume of the Library of America with his presidential speeches. We've got Lincoln by David Herbert Donald, which is considered by many to be a definitive 1-volume treatment of Lincoln. I found the subject matter, Lincoln's life, to be just warm and fascinating, just immensely interesting. I found the writing of it to be drier than David McCullough or Ron Chernow, so that one was a little bit harder to get through just for that reason, though the subject material was so fascinating. And then the book we're going to talk about in a minute is Lincoln's Melancholy by Joshua Wolf Schenck. This is kind of my dark horse pick because I didn't know anything about it before we got started, before I found it at the bookstore the other day. And I read it in about a day or two. And it was just an excellent little book. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. Stephen E. Ambrose's Nothing Like It in the World, which is about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. This one is one I believe that is more maligned so far as the historicity perspective from Stephen E. Ambrose. Of course, like I said, he was the one who wrote Undaunted Courage about Lewis and Clark. But a book that I remember from childhood. My dad had a paperback of it, and I would look through it and point at all the pictures of the trains So I remember this one with some sense of nostalgia, but definitely in full knowledge that this one's a little shakier than some of the other ones on the list. And then finally, David McCullough's The Wright Brothers. Not read this one, but I'm looking forward to it. It looks like a shorter little biography of the pioneers of aviation. And that is it. The couple that I'm missing are mostly Roman and Greek history. I think I've got one on the Peloponnesian War, one on early Rome. So that's kind of what I'm missing from the books that are still in my boxes. But anyway, let's sit down and I'll talk a little bit more about Lincoln's Melancholy. All right, let's discuss the book we have here, Lincoln's Melancholy, and it's subtitled How Depression Challenged a President and Fueled His Greatness. Of course, it's a book by a fellow named Joshua Wolf Schenck, who, according to the back flap of the book, is an essayist and independent scholar who's based in New York. It was published, I think, in 2005. And I think it may have been eclipsed somewhat by Doris Goodwin's A Team of Rivals, which came out about the same time, which is a more popular book, I would say, on the history of Abraham Lincoln. But this book, I was at the used bookstore, and I was just combing the shelves, and my thing is that I do enough research on books to where I know what I am looking for. I have a short list whenever I go into places, or a running list. And if I see the one that I need or want, then I will pick it up. And if I don't, I leave with nothing. But this book caught my eye on the shelves. I didn't know anything about it. But I picked it up and read the subtitle. And it really struck me just how different and interesting the subject matter was. It's a fascinating take on a figure, a man who, has been written about to such an extent that you could almost not think of anything else to say about him. But there is. That's the fascinating thing. There always is with Lincoln. There's always something else to say about him. So I took it home. And I read it in the course of just a couple of days. It didn't take me very long. The book is only, I guess, about 240 pages or so. And it was a book that was making a case. It's a fascinating mixture of a couple of different genres. It's a biography. It tells the story of his life. Of course, from mostly one angle, the story of his mental health, and it kind of it provides a bit of a psychoanalysis as well, and blends some fascinating facts and figures about depression and people who go through depression. And it builds the case, and I think it builds it very well, that Lincoln's traumas, tragedies, depressions, and struggles that he went through throughout his life, from his early life all the way to his death, made him into the man who was able to do so much for the nation and for the thousands who were enslaved. It gave him the compassion and the grit and the determination to do what needed to be done. The thing is that he never overcame it completely. I think so often, and this is what he's mentioning, so often our language is about, well, how do we overcome depression? How do we stop being depressed, I guess. And the thing that Schenck writes is that, by all accounts, Lincoln didn't. There were a couple times in his life where he was suicidal, and it talks about those in great detail. And he was able to persevere through those times, but his life, he was never very happy. from, sometimes the overblown story of Anne Rutledge to the death of 2 of his children and the third who died after his passing, to the loss of so many friends in the war, to the loss of his mother when he was a child. He never beat it. He never overcame it, but he used it to fuel what made him good and great. And those are the words that I've always tried to come up with myself. I work as a nurse, and I've worked in hospice, and there have been occasions where I've tried to put kind of those thoughts down to words, and I've had such a hard time. And this gives me the tool to be able to verbalize that better. That individuals who go through these difficult times are capable of so much empathy and compassion. They're capable of so much good if they can use the trial that they're going through, a trial that may never let up fully, but use the trial that they're going through and weaponize it for something that is so much bigger than themselves. And so I thought that was so powerful, and this is a powerful little book. I highly recommend it to any who have an interest in what I've talked about. I think it's so much. I think it's all that and more. So I can't even think of anything else to say about it. It's just excellent. And so that's kind of the thought I want to leave you on today. And I would say the exact same thing to you, that if you are or have or will be going through anything of that nature, persevering can provide you that grit that you need to do so much for those around you. It's just a brilliant way to look at it. We can provide so much empathy and support for those who are going through something similar or just something completely different. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I hope to put out some more soon. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. Thank you so much. I hope you have a blessed day. I hope that you stay safe wherever you are. If there's bad road conditions, I hope that you send up a prayer for me as I go into work tomorrow. But I thank you all for watching, and I hope that you all have a very, very blessed day. Thank you.